All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive. You ready to go deep on the Great Wall of China?
Always ready to dive into history.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
I am so pumped for this one. This thing is massive, like you can see it from space.
It's truly one of the most iconic structures on the planet.
And we've got this awesome YouTube video from Discovery UK. It's called Blowing Up History, 7 Wonders, and it's all about how they built this insane wall.
I love that series. They really break down the engineering and the history in a way that's easy to understand.
Totally. And it's not just about like the bricks and mortar. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. There's a human story there too.
Right?
Like, who built this thing? How did they do it? What were their lives like?
Exactly. We're talking centuries of history, like ingenious engineering, and these human stories that often get forgotten.
It's easy to forget that behind every great monument are the countless individuals who labored to make it a reality.
Okay, so get this. The Great Wall wasn't even China's first attempt at building a wall.
Yeah, that's right. For centuries, China had to deal with threats from nomadic tribes to the north.
So like these tribes would just roll up on horseback and try to take their stuff.
Exactly. They'd conduct raids aiming to plunder resources from Chinese settlements.
Okay, so what did the Chinese do about it?
They started building walls way before the iconic brick wall we picture today. We're talking over 1,500 years earlier.
Whoa, 1,500 years before. So what were these early walls made of, like sandcastles?
Not quite. They primarily used earth and natural materials, whatever they could find in the local environment.
So like a more primitive version of the wall?
Yeah, you could say that. But they served a crucial purpose. They helped protect valuable agricultural lands and key trade routes, like the Silk Road.
Ah, the Silk Road.
Oh, that's right.
It was a network of trade routes that connected east and west for centuries.
Exactly. And controlling those routes meant controlling the flow of goods and ideas. It was vital to China's economy and cultural exchange.
So I get why they built walls, but why the massive upgrade, the one we know today? What changed the game?
The Mongols.
Oh man, the Mongols. That video did not hold back on describing their raids.
They were brutal and relentless, and they exposed weaknesses in the existing defenses.
Yeah, it's crazy to imagine the terror those attacks must have instilled.
Absolutely. The Mongols were a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
And strategically, the capital city, Beijing, was particularly vulnerable.
So the emperor was like, we need a bigger wall.
Basically. The fear of further Mongol incursions, coupled with the vulnerability of Beijing, fueled the decision to create a stronger, more formidable barrier.
And formidable is an understatement. This thing is 13,000 miles long, 22 feet high, 16 feet thick, billions upon billions of blocks, countless watchtowers.
It's hard to even fathom the scale of it. The logistics involved are mind-boggling.
Yeah, speaking of logistics, the video showed these massive bricks, way bigger than the ones we use today.
Yeah.
How did they make enough bricks for a structure that long?
That's where the ingenuity of ancient Chinese engineering comes in. They didn't have machines, but they had a deep understanding of materials and a mastery of brick-making techniques.
I'm picturing a landscape dotted with kilns, flames shooting into the sky, like a constant churn of activity.
You're not far off. Thousands of kilns would have been operating across the region, their fires burning day and night, just to meet the demand for bricks.
Wow, so they've got these giant kilns, these oversized bricks. What could possibly go wrong?
Well, controlling the temperature of those kilns was critical. If it got too hot, the bricks wouldn't just crack, they would explode.
Explode like grenades.
Exactly. Talk about a high-pressure job.
I would not want to be the kiln guy, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But on a serious note, I can't help but think about all the people involved in this project. It must have taken a massive workforce.
You're absolutely right. And that brings us to one of the most significant aspects of this story, the human cost.
Yeah, the human cost. It's easy to get caught up in the engineering and the scale of it all, but we can't forget about the people who actually built this thing.
Building the Great Wall was back-breaking, dangerous work. And tragically, it came at a steep price. The video mentioned an estimated 400,000 men died during its construction.
400,000. That's just heartbreaking. It makes you wonder how a society even functioned with that level of loss.
It's a question that historians continue to grapple with. To understand the human cost, we need to look beyond the numbers and consider the societal structures and the political climate of the time.
Okay, so let's unpack that. What were the circumstances that allowed for such a massive loss of life?
Well, for starters, the value placed on individual life was vastly different back then, especially for those considered laborers or commoners.
So basically their lives were seen as expendable.
It's a harsh reality, but it's important to understand the historical context. We'll dive deeper into this in the next part of our deep dive, but for now, let's just sit with the weight of that number. 400,000 lives lost. It's a sobering reminder that behind every monumental achievement, There are often untold stories of hardship and sacrifice.
400,000 lives. It's hard to even wrap your head around a number like that.
It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it? The human cost of these grand ambitions.
Yeah, and it makes you think about, like, how did they justify that? How did society even function with that kind of loss?
Well, to understand it, we have to consider the social and political landscape of China at the time. The emperor had absolute power.
Right? So, like, what he said went, no questions asked.
Pretty much, refusal or dissent could be seen as treason, and the punishments were severe.
So if the emperor said, you're building a wall, well, you built the wall.
Exactly. The needs of the state often overshadowed individual rights, especially for commoners.
That's a tough reality to think about, but it helps to explain how such a massive project was even possible.
Right. And it's a reminder that the past was a very different time with different values and priorities.
Okay, so back to the wall itself. Did it actually work? Did it do what it was supposed to do?
That's a complex question. While it was a formidable physical obstacle, no wall is truly impenetrable.
Yeah, even in the video they mentioned that the Mongols eventually breached the wall.
Exactly. The wall was never meant to be a solitary, unbreachable barrier. It was one component of a larger defensive strategy.
So like a piece of the puzzle. What else was involved?
They had military outposts stationed along the wall, watchtowers for communication, mobile troops that could respond to threats.
So it was more about slowing down invaders, buying time to organize a defense.
Precisely. It was a system of interconnected defenses, each layer contributing to the overall effectiveness of the strategy.
Interesting. So it wasn't just about the physical wall itself, it was about strategy and coordination.
Exactly. The wall acted as a force multiplier, allowing the defenders to use their resources more effectively.
That makes sense. But beyond its practical purpose, the wall also became a powerful symbol, didn't it?
Absolutely. Over time, the Great Wall evolves into a symbol of China's strength, unity, and resilience.
It's like a physical representation of their national identity.
That's a great way to put it. It became a source of pride and a testament to their ability to overcome adversity.
But it also carries a lot of baggage, right?
Yeah.
Like the human cost, the environmental impact.
You're right. It's a complex legacy, one that's both awe-inspiring and troubling.
Yeah, it's a reminder that progress often comes at a price, and that we need to be mindful of the consequences of our actions.
Especially when undertaking projects of this magnitude, the Great Wall serves as a cautionary tale as much as a triumph of human ingenuity.
Okay, so speaking of consequences, the video mentioned the environmental impact of building the wall. Can you talk about that a bit?
Of course, constructing something on this scale inevitably had a significant impact on the environment. They needed vast amounts of resources: timber for scaffolding, fuel for the kilns, and of course all the earth and stone.
It's like a giant scar across the landscape, right?
In a way, yes. The construction led to deforestation, which altered the landscape and impacted local ecosystems.
And all those kilns burning constantly must have created a lot of pollution.
Absolutely. The smoke and emissions would have contributed to air pollution on a significant scale.
It's a good reminder that even centuries ago, human activities had environmental consequences.
Yeah, and it raises questions about how they managed waste disposal and resource depletion back then.
It's fascinating to think about the long-term impact of something built so long ago.
It really highlights the interconnectedness of human actions and the environment, something that's more relevant today than ever before.
Okay, so before we wrap up, I wanted to touch on something else the video mentioned. The criticisms and controversies surrounding the Great Wall.
Oh yeah. There's definitely been debate over the years about its effectiveness, its symbolism, and the ethical implications of its construction.
Like what kind of criticisms?
Well, some historians argue that its effectiveness as a defensive structure has been overstated. They point out that it was breached multiple times throughout history.
So it wasn't the ultimate deterrent.
Not really.
Yeah.
And some argue that the resources poured into its construction could have been used more effectively elsewhere.
So was it more of a symbolic gesture than a practical solution?
That's one interpretation. The wall's symbolic value as a representation of power and control may have outweighed its actual effectiveness in preventing invasions.
That's an interesting point. And what about the ethical concerns?
Well, the human cost is a major issue. As we discussed, the loss of life was staggering, and the working conditions were brutal. Some critics view the wall as a monument to forced labor and oppression.
Yeah, that's definitely a dark side to its history, one that's important to acknowledge.
And then there's the ongoing debate about the wall's preservation and restoration. How do we balance authenticity with the need to prevent further decay?
It's a tough question. How much intervention is too much? How do we preserve the past without erasing it?
Exactly. And the decisions made today will have a lasting impact on how the Great Wall is perceived and experienced by future generations.
Wow, this deep dive has been a real eye-opener. It's clear that the Great Wall is much more than just a tourist attraction.
It's a complex and multifaceted symbol, one that reflects the best and worst of humanity.
It's a reminder of our capacity for great things, but also of the potential for destruction and exploitation.
And it challenges us to think critically about progress and its costs, to learn from the past and make more responsible choices for the future.
Okay, well, on that note, I think we're ready to move on to our final thoughts and wrap up this deep dive.
It really makes you think.
It does. The sheer scale of it, the human cost, the environmental impact, like it's all connected.
It is. It all speaks to something deeper about human nature. Our drive to build and create and leave our mark on the world.
But sometimes those marks come at a steep price.
Right, and that's the thing we have to grapple with. The duality of progress, the good and the bad, the triumphs and the tragedies.
So how do we reconcile those two sides? How do we celebrate the achievements while acknowledging the costs?
I think it starts with honesty, with recognizing that progress isn't always a straight line, and that there are often unintended consequences.
And being willing to ask tough questions, like what are we willing to sacrifice for the sake of ambition?
Exactly. And how can we learn from the past, from the mistakes that were made?
Because clearly the Great Wall isn't the only example of this happening throughout history.
Not at all. Think about the pyramids, the Colosseum, even our modern megacities. They all tell a similar story of ambition, innovation, and the sacrifices made along the way.
It's like we're constantly trying to outdo ourselves to build bigger, better, faster.
But we have to ask ourselves, at what cost? What are we willing to give up in the pursuit of progress?
And are the benefits shared equally? Or are some people paying a higher price than others?
Those are the questions we need to be asking ourselves today as we face new challenges like climate change and resource scarcity.
Yeah, it's like we're standing on the shoulders of giants, right? Both literally and figuratively.
And we have a responsibility to learn from their mistakes, to use that knowledge to build a better future.
So what are your biggest takeaways from exploring the Great Wall's story? What resonates most with you?
For me, it's the human element. The realization that history isn't just about dates and events. It's about people.
Their hopes, their dreams, their struggles.
Exactly. The Great Wall is a testament to human ingenuity and perseverance. But it's also a reminder of our capacity for cruelty and exploitation.
It's a story that continues to unfold today, in different ways and in different places.
Right. We still grapple with the same questions about progress, sacrifice, and the balance of power.
Well, I think that's a pretty powerful message to leave our listeners with.
Yeah, it's a reminder that history isn't just something that happened in the past. It's alive, it's relevant, and it has something to teach us about the choices we make today.
Well said. So to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on this journey.
We hope you've gained a new perspective on the Great Wall of China and what it represents.
And that you'll continue to explore these big questions about history, humanity, and our place in the world.
Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep pushing for a better future.
Until next time, happy deep diving.